where British and American power turned the wheels of industry, oiled the way of commerce. In the south, the Third Valley, the West River flowing by Canton to empty at Hong Kong in the sea. In the steaming Southland, peasants stooped in paddies to plant rice and spoke a dialect no Peking Chinese could even faintly comprehend. The coastal cities, where most Westerners lived, squirmed with jostling people, animal energy, humans used as beasts in street and field. Most still wore pigtails, forced on them a symbol of submission to the Manchu Dynasty and its son of heaven. But within the old forbidden city, there was no government, no son of heaven. The aging Empress Dowager, her spirit broken by the Boxer War, lingered dying until 1908, and then, for all intents and purposes, the throne was empty, save for an infant of 3 years installed to sit in it.
And then it vanished. Simply vanished. The Manchu Dynasty disappeared overnight. Nothing like this has ever happened in all history. 2,000 years of tradition, the whole structure of the imperial Confucian political thought dissolving to dust. The Chinese give it a name and a date. They call it Shuang Shi, double 10. The date being October 10, 1911, when a riot occurred in the Yangtze Valley which they couldn't suppress, and 5 weeks later, the regime had disappeared, the dynasty overthrown, never to reappear again in history. And out of this turbulence, there emerge two types of Asian leader, arch symbols, the man of guns and the man of ideas. And these two types, the gunman and the dreamer, have perplexed all our efforts in Asia for the 50 years since, and they still perplex and haunt all our policy even today.
In Asian politics, gunmen rise first. General Yuan Shikai seized power at Peking, turned loose lesser generals to ransack provinces. Briefly, he gathered a puppet assembly, imported an American professor to write a constitution for a republic. But old ways were easier. Returning to Confucian order in 1915, Yuan named himself emperor, and 6 months later died. His rival, Sun Yat-sen, was the man of dreams. The dream of China, powerful, free of emperors and foreigners, made him from his youth a revolutionary. Students, teachers, merchants meeting in such secret headquarters joined his conspiracy. On postcards, he scrawled a rising sun, emblem of a new flag someday to be. For 20 years, he planned destruction of the Manchu tyrants, to see his dreams betrayed by Yuan Shikai. But his ideas were catching fire. In 1919, students throbbing to his fiery message, sick of chaos, furious at foreign pillage, angered by Japan's demands for more of China, filled the streets with protest riots. But students had no guns, ideas, no armies. Armies belonged to warlord generals, the heirs of Yuan Shikai. Power and force were theirs, whether trained to fight with Manchu Broadsword or equipped with second-hand artillery. Laughable to Europeans, in China, such troops struck terror. Their purpose, simple, to rule by killing. For 15 years, a dozen regional overlords subdivided, morselled out provinces to lesser feudal warlords by the score. Warlord armies came in all shapes and weaponries, as colorful as such grotesque commanders as giant Zhang Zuolin of legendary sexual appetite. Yan Xishan, the treacherous drug addict. Wu Peifu, lover of flowers and gardens.
They never fought if it rained. They thought it was foolish to go out in the rain and fight. So if it was a rainy day, you were quite safe and comfortable. And then, of course, they all usually began at a certain time. They seldom began before 10 o'clock after everybody got his good breakfast and all that. They always took off for lunch. And then by sunset, doesn't matter how hot the battle had been, When the sun set, everything stopped and quieted down for the night, so you could get a good night's sleep and be ready to fight the next day.
China watched such troops in shame, craving order, knowing sorrow. Overlord in Manchuria was Zhang Zuolin. Beginning life a common bandit, this scheming marshal had learned to mock all Chinese law, flout all patriotic need. Bribed by Japanese industrialists, protected by their garrisons, his soldiers let the Japanese aliens exploit this northern treasure land at will. Even the best of warlords, Feng Yuxiang, the Christian general who baptized soldiers with a fire hose, insisting cleanliness is next to godliness, groped in vain to find a spark to unify his nation. In every valley, town, and village, men trembled at the sight of warlord soldiers. Death came by twitch of trigger, in gusts of senseless cruelty. And life became so cheap that death itself became a spectacle. Children, growing up, became inured to violence, a culture of scholars transformed by killing. In flight from warlords, drought, and taxes, from loot and rapine, refugees knew that only in the colonies and concessions of hated foreigners could they seek safety. Here, beggars for their bread, they might find mercy. A former State Department officer, Ernest Price, remembers China in the mid-20s.
We hit the country at a time of terrific heat wave, and at the same time drought in the great valleys. As our train pulled through this area, little boys at the stations would come out pot-bellied, spindle-legged, and holding out their hands and saying, "Da lao ye, da lao ye, please, master, please." We were horrified. We never had seen anything like it. And one of our legation officials said, "Now, boys, I want to tell you something. Don't let this get under your skin, this sort of thing. You're going to see a lot more of it in China."
In the Western Enclaves of the coast, life for foreigners went on unchanged. Here, the skyline walled from passing tourists the site of Chinese anguish, while permanent expatriates returned each afternoon to homes of splendor, where countless servants made for master and his missy lady a sunlit way of life old China hands still mourn. From Shanghai, foreigners controlled most Chinese industries, mines, mills, and railways. They set her tariffs, collected taxes. Prosperity rested as it always had on foreign guns and gunboats, within whose shelter Western pleasures undisturbed rolled on. At racecourses and at resorts, Chinese appeared, as always, servants only. At Western clubs, the tinkle of ice and cocktails rose above the muffled sound of warlord guns outside. Yet even in Shanghai, if one listened, one could hear another note. In the streets, students were calling for revolt, middle-class youngsters, yet their message caught the ear of workers too. By 1925, a ferment unsettled every major city. Symbol of all protest was Sun Yat-sen, who called on China to slay the dragon of imperialism. Slowly, through the early 1920s, Sun Yat-sen had somehow built a government, won a tiny southern foothold at Canton, ringed by hostile warlords. By 1924, the aging revolutionary had learned, ideas and guns must go together. Ideas he hammered into three principles called San Min Jui. First nationalism, next democracy, then socialism. To his nationalist party, the Kuomintang, he now insists, to conquer China, they must fight to throw the warlords and imperialists out. They will get guns, for he has found them. Spurned by the West, in 1923, he tells the New York Times, "We have lost hope of help from America, England, France. The only country that shows any sign of helping us in the South is the Soviet government of Russia. Flatly, this report concludes, the prevailing foreign estimate of Dr. Sun has been that he is a dreamer and therefore dangerous. Arch symbol of Russian help is Mikhail Borodin, veteran agent of the Kuomintang, who brings the guidance of the Bolsheviks to Sun's dreaming. Counseling, scheming, urging, the mentor communist becomes an all-pervasive influence, induces Sun Yat-sen to let the tiny Chinese Communist Party, 430 members, join Sun's nationalists. Sun gathers new-style Chinese officers to fight for country, not for loot. Of these, his favorite is Chiang Kai-shek. Sent hastily to Russia for training, Zhang soon returns, directs the Huampo Military Academy at Canton, where patriots are trained by Russians to officer armies that will give the dream fresh muscle.